Welcome everybody to this very special event. So brilliant as ever to see our Wanderlust readers. And of course in this brilliant event we are talking to the equally brilliant Bettany Hughes.
Oh.
Hey! So yeah, I'm Lyn Hughes, the founding editor of Wanderlust. And today we've got a bit of music going on somewhere as well.
Stop.
I will explain. I do hope you love this space. Isn't it wonderful? It's, believe it or not, it's a former courtroom. And, but although we use it a lot for work and for meetings, this is the first time that we've used it for a reader event. So I really hope you're going to enjoy this space, and do give us any feedback afterwards, because we're hoping this will be the first of many reader events that we'll hold here. So we'll see how that goes. Do let us know. But anyway, so today I'm going to be talking to Bettany about a very special, overlooked and enigmatic place called AlUla. And we're also going to be talking quite a bit about a very special, overlooked and enigmatic culture called the Nabateans.
Yeah.
So before we really get stuck into it, as I say, we're going to be, a lot of this focuses on AlUla, who have kindly brought us all together today. So let's see a video of where we're talking about.
This is my video, so I should just say, just so you enjoy it, I think it's coming up. This is...
No, sorry, we're going to see the AlUla video first.
Me.
Bettany's always so keen, which is why we love her. No, before we get to Bettany's video, AlUla, everybody.
You may have never met, but she has nurtured humanity for over 7,000 years. An ancient oasis that saw agriculture spring to life. Witnessed the birth of literature and inspired new art forms to flourish. Her promise is to revitalize, always and in all ways. Reviving tradition, welcoming travelers, embracing new ways of thinking, and restoring environments. She is not only breathtaking, but life-giving. Welcome to AlUla.
Yay, AlUla.
No. I'm just going to move so these nice people can see. There you go. Well, we can...
Yeah, we'll play. Hi, Bettany.
They can't see the screen. That's all.
Yeah, we can always move things if we need to, just say. As I say, this is the first time. You're the guinea pig, so yeah, don't be shy. Okay, so that gave you a bit of a flavour for the destination, which we'll be obviously coming back to. So the Nabateans, I think for most of us, maybe it's just me, when we first, for a lot of us, when we travel, the first exposure we've had to the Nabateans was at Petra in Jordan. I see a lot of nodding heads. How many of you have been to Petra? Yeah, most of us have been to Petra. How many of us have been to AlUla? Okay, we've got this. No, that's great to know, sprinkling. But the majority have not. And so I hope you're going to find the next 45 minutes or so absolutely fascinating. But also, let's just find out more anyway about the Nabateans, because, to be frank, this is probably the reason that perhaps people have first hear about AlUla and its wonders. So, Bettany, who were the Nabateans? Why don't we know more about them, and why were you so drawn to them?
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Lyn. First of all, hello. How lovely to be in the room with all of you. Very nice to see you all. And I should just explain that some of the photos that you've got here are behind the scenes shots of when we were filming this 3-part series about the Nabateans and their story. So I'm delighted to answer any questions about them or the pics or the place as we go through. So I have been obsessed with the Nabateans for 35 years. Exactly as you say, Lyn. Originally, if people had heard of them, I think they probably most associated them with Petra. But I found that when I talked to people about who built Petra, people would say, oh, was it the Greeks or the Romans? It's like, no, it was neither of those, you know. It survived at the time of the Greeks and the Romans, but it's this incredible civilization and culture from the Arabian Peninsula. And it really frustrated me that they were, if anything, just a footnote in history. And actually, when we were first proposing doing this series, people all said, oh, you'll probably have enough material for 1 hour, you know, you'll never get 3 hours out of it. And we were really determined to try to do this sort of legacy bit of work. So the Nabateans basically are extremely cool and very important in the story of world history. So they were, in many ways, the kind of engine, the sort of petrol of ancient civilization for 2 reasons. One, because they physically transported what was the petrol of the ancient world. So this substance called bitumen, which is a naturally occurring petrochemical that you get, for instance, in the Dead Sea. It also, you can harvest it on land as well. And the Nabateans, their kingdom stretched over the area of the Dead Sea at one point. And bitumen, if you think about it in the ancient world, life is really tough. So it's very hard to find sources of energy, it's very hard to find glue, it's very hard to find things that waterproof your boats, because boats are the main means of transport if you're trading internationally. And bitumen does all of those things. So bitumen you can use for light, you can use for heat, you can use as a glue, you use in mortar. So if you think of some of the great wonders of the world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, for instance, we know that bitumen was used in the creation of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And as I said, it's an amazing waterproofing agent. So if you've got boats which are transporting people and materials and ideas and culture, you need something to keep those waterproof. And bitumen does that. And the Nabateans pretty much had the monopoly on the trade of bitumen in the ancient world and of incense, frankincense. So coming up for Christmas now, we talk about gold, frankincense and myrrh, and the Nabateans were the culture that physically transported incense. Frankincense is basically a later medieval phrase for incense. It means kind of very posh incense. So they physically transported incense across continents. So they're really, really central. They also bring pearls from India. They eventually bring silks. We know that materials that they traded have ended up as far away as China. So they were kind of, I think of them as the kind of the Amazon service of the ancient world. And because they're traders, what they really care about are 2 things. One is making money, and also staying friends with other cultures, because you cannot be a trader unless you have good relationships with those around you. So that means that they don't tend to invade other people's lands. They don't write big glorifying histories where they talk about how strong and potent they are. So as a result of that, they've kind of been quietly written out of history, and they've quietly kind of fallen away to the footnotes, just because they didn't have a Strabo or a Livy or Herodotus writing, telling the future how cool they were. So I kind of love them because they need to be put back into the heart of history where they belong. But also, you know, I think as we've got a bit of time this afternoon to talk about them, they really, really are fascinating. So they do things in a slightly different way to normal ancient civilization.
Okay, so before we get into that and just put things into perspective, can you just tell us a bit about geographically?
Yeah.
So what was Petra, for instance, compared to Hegra in AlUla.
Yeah, so Petra, which is obviously, as you all know now, in Jordan, ended up being their capital, and they traded from Petra across the Red Sea, but also through Egypt and up across the Mediterranean. And Hegra, which is this beautiful place that you're seeing a lot of in the images here, Hegra was their southernmost outpost as far as we know. I mean, archaeology, as you know, is incredibly exciting because it's always changing, the pictures, the story is always changing. But right now, Hegra is as far as we think they got in terms of a really big established city. And Hegra really was a big city. So it was full of 2, possibly 3-story buildings. Many thousands of people lived there. It was a real kind of hub of trade, going further south to what is now Oman and the Yemen to get that frankincense, to transport it out to the rest of the world. So they're very connected, Petra and Hegra, and they knew about each other and they wrote about each other. So you have to understand Hegra if you're going to understand the Nabatean story.
Yeah. So Hegra is, as Bettany says, where the Nabateans were, and it's within AlUla, which is a huge area. It's the size of Wales. I love it when so many things get compared to the size of Wales. But AlUla apparently really is the size of Wales. So a massive area. But within that, we've got this wonderful area, Hegra. Now, you say this was a city. Perhaps buildings of 2 or 3 stories high. Now, of course, when we go there now, we don't see those. So what are we going to see, and how much do we know?
Yeah, well, I mean, do you all like history here? I'm kind of guessing. Lots of lovely nodding, I guess you do. So there are 35,000 archaeological sites in the wider Hegra region. I mean, that is even... You know, for me, that's impressive. That is an extraordinary number of live archaeological digs. And it's the reason as well that I was very excited about going there because, and if you guys go, it's very rare that you go to a place where for the first time in human history, archaeological sites are being dug and material is being exposed. So it's absolutely kind of at the cutting edge of discovery. So if you go to Hegra, you'll find that there are beautiful, you can see these incredible standing tombs, which if any of you have been to Petra, you might recognise that kind of rock carved tomb. But here in Hegra, they just arise like sort of spaceships out of the desert. And you can also, the area where the central city was, actually, if you go up to some of the higher points, you can just about make out this kind of network of roads, 132 wells, because this is the desert that we're talking about, and the Nabateans were masters and mistresses, very importantly, women are very important in Nabatean culture, of water management. So you can see the channels, you can see where these wells were. So it's a real, you know, it's an absolute kind of wealth of archaeology and history.
Yeah. Now, as a visitor, like you say, these amazing tombs are
like that,
perhaps... Now, that one is actually that was a man, wasn't it? That one particular one that's so famous.
Yeah.
But what struck me when I went and saw these amazing tombs was that so many of them were women.
Yeah, tons.
They've got their names inscribed outside.
Yeah, so it's one of the many reasons. I love men, I should just say, but I love it when you find a rare ancient culture where women are really privileged and have status and standing. And that absolutely happens with the Nabateans. Which kind of makes sense when you think about it, because if you've got a culture where most of the men are off in these huge camel caravans, I mean, we're told, I think it's an exaggeration, but we're told there could be as many as 10,000 camels at one time. I think that's an exaggeration, but I think there probably were thousands. That's what they're doing. They're going for months, possibly years at a time, these sort of moving cities, which means in the cities that are left, i.e. Hegra, you're leaving women in charge. So we absolutely know that they had authority there, and we can tell that for many reasons, but sort of 2 specific things. That if you look at the coins of the Nabatean kings, often the queens are shown not just on the reverse, but sort of standing with their back to back with their kings, which again is really, really, really unusual in the classical world. And also, as you say, some of these tombs are dedicated, paid for by women and dedicated to those women's daughters and to their female servants and slaves. Again, there were some slaves in Nabatean culture. We don't want to kind of, be rose-tinted about it. But that, again, is very... So actually, what you're looking at there, that tomb that just appeared there, that was paid for by a woman, and it's covered in this incredible writing that tells us about her story. So, yeah, so it's very... And it's really... I don't know... I don't want to get too kind of woo-woo, but I think you can sometimes get a sense of a place, even centuries after. And you do get a sense. Travelling there as a woman, I had a real sort of sense that it didn't feel to me like it was a place of sorrow for women, particularly back in ancient history. It feels as though those women have kind of left their mark on the landscape.
Yeah, and talking of women who keep their mark, one of the scenes in the series that stood out for me was when there's a coin has been found and it's got Cleopatra's head on it. Yeah. Because, of course, that was all at that time.
Yeah,
in history.
Totally. Yeah, so that's kind of who's around at the time of the Nabateans, exactly, to put them into context. So Cleopatra is queen. So in one of these tombs, this beautiful coin with Cleopatra's head on it has been found. In fact, the Nabateans are very involved in Cleopatra's story because they're incredible traders across deserts, and they also become incredible maritime traders as well. And pirates, which means they're quite kind of, feisty mariners. And so at the time that Cleopatra is fighting against the Romans, she hires a Nabatean fleet to try to help her in the Battle of Actium. Actually, they double-cross her, which is one of the reasons that, she doesn't win. But yeah, so they're very involved with her. So it's at the time of Cleopatra. Herod the Great, who you've all heard of, his mum was a Nabatean. I'm sure know the story of St. John the Baptist and Salome and the dance of the seven veils. And one of the reasons that St. John was so furious with Herod was that he'd put aside his Nabatean wife. So Herod Antipas had a wife who was Nabatean and divorced her. And John the Baptist just thought he was really disrespecting this woman, knowing how powerful Nabatean women were. So they're really stitched into the sort of story of all the big names of history. Yeah. But it's as you say, it's really interesting how we don't hear about that in sort of, in the typical textbooks.
Yeah, had no idea. And you certainly don't get any of this when you go to Petra.
No.
And I think for me, one of the joys of Hegra is that it's been buried under the sands.
Yeah.
You literally, when you're there, and it's got the most powerful feeling around it. But when you're there, you realise that so little is still known, and so much is waiting to be discovered. And so, am I right in thinking a lot of these tombs, for instance, they were under sand, they were hidden.
Yeah.
And then they have found one where they found remains, because a lot of the tombs were empty, but they found one where they did find remains of people. And so, for instance, they found the remains of one woman where they've actually reconstructed the face.
Yeah, that's right. So a woman called Hinat, who you can go and see. So I know that you loved this when you went, so you're kind of face to face.
Well, unlike Bettany, I can't stand there. I try very hard. I stand there and I'm trying to imagine, where that city was, who these people were. And so I must admit, when I went to the visitor centre, having heard so much about these women from my guide, a female guide, by the way, most of the guides there are women. When I went to the visitor centre and they've got this reconstruction of Hemat's face, for me, that did help bring this person to life, because you could see the facial structure. I don't know whether it's right or not. Yeah. But you could see the structure of a woman.
Yeah, that's right. And they were often buried in these sort of family tombs. So exactly as you say, though. I always get into trouble when I say it's a bit like Indiana Jones, because I know that he was a very bad archaeologist, and we shouldn't follow that archaeological practice. But it really is like Indiana Jones. Like you say, entire tombs. These massive tombs. Tombs that are 50 meters high sometimes are emerging from the sands there, and you can see that place the image that you've just seen on the screen is this incredible, it's called the Diwan, and there are lots of different opinions about what it was used for, but I think it was a kind of giant ritual dining space. So if you go and have a look at it, you can see all around the edges there are these stone couches like you see in bad movies about Rome, you know, when people are lying around, you know, sort of eating grapes and reclining. But it's like a massive one of those. And we think it's probably where the traders and the merchants of the region, they had to park their camels outside. So there was literally a camel park outside Hegra. And then you came in and then you would be sort of richly welcomed by the leaders of the city in this feast. They loved their wine. We know that they were producing a lot of wine in Hegra and roundabout. So
is this why you like them, Bettany?
Yes, I know, one of the reasons. No, but it is really, again, in Petra, if you've probably seen there's lovely decorations of Dionysus was worshipped in Petra, and there's these sort of beautiful frescoes, and the same would have been true of Hegra as well.
Yeah, and the diwan that you mentioned, which I just thought was absolutely wow, it took my breath away. I mean, it's a bigger space in this room, probably.
Oh,
isn't
yeah.
It?
Yeah.
And
it's probably, it's probably about the same dimensions as this room, actually, in that height. Yeah.
And then that is obviously at one end of a seek. For those of you, most of you have been to Petra and you walk through a seek. Now, this is a much smaller seek, but so atmospheric.
Yes, oh yeah. And you really get that sense of passage from one space to another. And I mean, what you'll see if you travel there, it was a very cosmopolitan city, and we know that because along this seek you have these niches where lots of different kinds of gods could be worshipped. So there's a little shrine where the Jewish deity could be worshipped. There's something where the local deities could be worshipped. The Romans who eventually end up there worship their gods and goddesses too. So it's a sort of beautifully designed city, which makes it, as a traveller, makes it really beautiful to travel around.
Yes, because just to be clear, I mean, because in this series we see Bettany getting special access, not surprisingly, although at times I thought, oh gosh, I'm not Bettany, because you go climbing up onto things and it does look a little bit dodgy at times.
I know.
But Bettany gets special access, of course, not surprisingly, but of course as a visitor though, you do see almost as much as Bettany. I must stress. You get to see all the outsides of the tombs, you get to see the diwan, you get to walk through the seek, and you get to go inside at least one of the tombs.
Yes, I mean, I don't know, you know, there are people from AlUla here. When I was last there were no ropes, you know, so there's a nodding happening, that's very cool. So you really can get inside. But do not, please, I'm absolutely petrified that I'm going to be leading someone to their death. So please, if you watch the series, do not follow me and go and clamber up on top of the tombs, which is one of those things. I've got a cameraman who's really bad for me that we egg each other on. So, oh, go on, let's just sort of see. And then I was head girl, and I don't like taking no for an answer. So I'm always very head girly. People are like, come on, we'd all be happier, wouldn't we? You know, if we went, just let us up here, and then we just sort of run. But it was astonishing being up there, again, thinking about those stonemasons who carved these incredible things out of rock. And you probably know that if you've been to Petra, that they're almost certainly starting at the top and working their way down on ropes to the bottom. So to be up at the very, very top of these and think about those first chisel marks going in was just astonishing. But genuinely, please don't climb up there because A, you'll get arrested, and also you might fall off. But apart from climbing up on top of them, you can go and just sort of feel as though you're part of that amazing city. And right in the middle, there's a temple they worshipped. Really interestingly, they were very aligned with nature. It was very much, you know, they spent a lot of time under the night sky. They felt very aligned to the desert and to water, and their gods, for most of the time, are just rectangular figures. So they're not anthropomorphic. They're not human-faced. And they worshipped this great sun god, Dishara was one of their key gods, and there's a temple to him right in the heart of Hegra that you can still see, where there would have been altars with incense honouring him. And there was an incredibly exciting moment when we were researching, when we'd been in Hegra, that we got a call from an archaeologist all the way over in the Bay of Naples, saying that he'd found underwater an altar to the great sun god, Nabatean sun god Dishara, on the seabed in the Bay of Naples. So of course we rushed to try to film it. And the reason that was there is because the Romans, of course, loved incense. They couldn't get enough of incense. And because they were importing so much from the Nabateans, there was actually a Nabatean colony in the Bay of Naples where they lived, and so they had their own temple, and that means that if there's a colony, it means that people are staying there. So a lot of Romans would have been born with Nabatean heritage. So it's, you know, it's a very exciting place to discover, but it's very connected to all of us as well. Some of us in the room have probably got Nabatean ancestry and we just don't realise it.
Oh, that's mind-blowing to think.
Yeah, I know.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Get DNA tested, exactly. And you know, you would be able to find out. Exactly.
And again, and if they were traders, of course.
Of course.
They'd have been, no, absolutely. You touched on the night skies there and things celestial, because am I right in thinking that the tombs are facing either the sunrise or the sunset?
Yes, exactly. So they're very, again, you know, it's that brilliant sophistication of the ancient world, because you've got a lot of time to be and to think. And so the tombs are orientated exactly that, either to the rising or to the setting sun. And also we think to a constellation, a movement of the constellations. And it certainly, again, if you think about it, we're talking about a desert culture, so they travelled a lot by night. So a lot of their experience of the world was a nighttime experience, and they navigated by the stars. And
so it really would have been like the Three Kings of the story.
I mean, absolutely, 100%. And we spent a night with a Bedouin group in the desert in order to kind of experience that. And it was one of the most moving things I've ever done in my life, when I said to them, you know, do you feel connected to the Nabateans as your ancestors? And they said, we are Nabatean. You know, we still live, we still use their ideas, we still navigate in the same way that we do. We still create what they call, it's still called Nabatean poetry. When Bedouins speak poetry to each other, it's still called Nabatean poetry. And they still make bread. So Bedouin bread is called Nabatu bread, and it has exactly the same recipe, and we know this from an ancient recipe book, as the Nabateans and the Roman period Nabateans were using. And it's a thing where you basically knead the bread for 100, you have to knead it 120 times. It's made of flour and salt and sesame or olive oil, and then you bake it in the ashes of your desert fire, and it's absolutely delicious, but it also lasts for about 2 months. So when you're on the journey, and again, the Bedouins still bake this bread, and they still call it Nabatu bread, and it's still the same recipe as the Nabateans.
Oh, wonderful. There's still those traces of this culture.
It's very exciting.
It's all being passed down. Incredible. The thing about the stars as well, I don't know how many of you are into stargazing and so on. This is honestly one of the best places I've ever been for it. When I was there was a pop-up that you could go to, not in Hegra itself, but somewhere else within AlUla. And so they had telescopes, and you could go and do a stargazing experience. I learnt more in something like 20 minutes than I ever have at anything else like that. Absolutely incredible. It is a certified dark sky reserve in part of AlUla, and they are actually building an observatory. There's going to be some major telescopes there. They're going to be building accommodation for people who are very keen on astronomy. And so this is all in an area, I think it's further north from Hegra, for instance. But I think it's called Manara, and that will probably in 2028 be somewhere that you can really visit, stay, and so on. It's going to be incredible, I think. Having had this taster from the pop-up that they had, I can see how excited people are going to be about it. Absolutely stunning.
And you got to go to the nature reserve as well, didn't you?
I did. So, there's actually going to be a story in the issue of Wanderlust coming out in January by myself on AlUla. And so my particular interest tends to be wildlife and nature. And so also I knew that I couldn't write nearly as good a piece as Bettany about the historical side and Hegra, although I will touch on that. But when I was there, I was very interested in finding out about the wildlife, because actually in AlUla they've got this, as I say, this massive area, size of Wales, absolutely stunning scenery, which a lot of which you can see on here. And once upon a time, as I'm sure Bettany can tell us about, because we can see it on rock art, this area was full of wildlife. All sorts of antelope, all sorts of, what get considered prey species. There would have been cattle as well and so on, but lots and lots of wildlife. And there were even Arabian leopards. And the Arabian leopard is the smallest and rarest of the leopards. The numbers they think got down to a couple of hundred. And they're only really found in Yemen, Oman, and a few in Saudi. So there's a huge project to bring the Arabian leopards back. There's a breeding centre, well, by now 2 breeding centres, and they're going to be reintroducing them back into AlUla, into a particular national park called the Shiran. And which is a huge, huge area. I won't talk too much about it now. You can read the article in January. This reserve is so big, it's the size of Greater London. And so they are doing a lot of replanting and a lot of reintroducing ibex and oryx and lots of gazelles, all these other species. And of course, you can think of it like a pyramid. They have to bring back, first of all, the vegetation. So there's a lot of replanting, lots of work going on with that. Then they bring back the antelopes and the gazelles. And then, of course, they will be bringing back the leopards. So in Hegra itself, so as well as Shiran, this big national park I talked about, within Hegra, they have actually set up a wildlife reserve. And so you have a sort of safari type experience in there. It's literally like going out in somewhere like East Africa, where you're going in a safari jeep with a guide. It's not a massive area, and you can see the fence in places, but it's still very special. It's got wonderful rock formations, and with a bit of luck, because you tend to go either early in the morning or late afternoon, and with a bit of luck, you do actually get to see some of these species: ibex, oryx, gazelles, eagles, all sorts of bird life, and which is absolutely brilliant. And obviously it's going to be easier to see them in there than going into the huge national park. So that's an experience I recommend. There's also, if you're thinking of going and you're particularly keen on Hegra, there's a new hotel called the Chedi Hegra. It's still in soft opening. I was one of the first guests to stay there. And it's in what was the former rail station. So if you think of the railway that used to run up, think of Lawrence of Arabia days, and that same rail line that used to run up to Damascus. So there was a rail station there. It used to be a stopping point for pilgrims. And they have turned that now into a hotel, so it's within the UNESCO World Heritage site, which this is. It's right next to the wildlife reserve. You can cycle, I believe, to it.
Yeah.
And so there is, I think one of the things that I must stress about AlUla generally is that it's very much at the start of its tourism journey, if you like. It's a wonderful time to go. I think you'll agree, Bettany, that it's not, far from being overdeveloped. It's not over-touristed. Yeah. And so you've got these archaeological discoveries that are happening all the time. But there's also so many other things happening in this huge area.
Yeah, that's right. So there's an old town. So if the kind of medieval period is more your period, there's the old town that has been reconstructed, which has got kinds of classic shops and places, beautiful places that you can eat.
Artisan shops.
Artisan shops, exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of, and it's really kept. And again, what's really lovely there is that you talk to people who were born in those houses, who've been involved in the reconstruction, have been very, everybody's voice has really been heard in terms of that. So so there's also the old town, and then you can probably see from these images there's an oasis. So there's a natural huge oasis. I can't remember how many palm trees, 1,000, 2,000, something, huge number of palm trees as well. And in the oasis as well, you can stay there. There's also a lot of archaeology there, and there's a very, very, very good coffee shop called the Pink Camel coffee shop. So I found myself like, oh my God, what am I doing? You know, I've sort of come from this sort of Bedouin experience, and I was having a very nice cappuccino in the Pink Camel. So yeah, so it's kind of got a variety.
Oh, huge range. Did you get to visit D'Artantoro at all, a hotel in the Old Town?
Yeah,
like for dinner or anything?
No, it was actually still being made.
Oh,
it's still being reconstructed when I was there.
There's this incredible hotel, one of the old buildings in the Old Town. This is where I want to stay next time. One of these old buildings has been turned into a hotel. So it is one of these medieval buildings, original buildings. And at night, it's lit by something like 2,000 candles. And I went there twice, and the first time for dinner, and it was one of the best meals I had there. The food is so good, by the way, in AlUla, because you've got this incredible fresh produce from the oasis. But the D'Artantoro was so atmospheric, and I went another time just to see the rooms and get the thing. And there was this guy going along lighting all these candles, and it is just magical. You really feel like you've stepped back in time, like you say, you've gone back through the centuries.
Yeah.
But yeah, before we talk a bit more about AlUla, maybe because obviously we've talked a lot about the Nabateans, but of course they weren't the only civilization there. There have been all these other periods of history. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to pull out for us?
Well, just only in case you've been seeing it, but there's a sort of image there of holding this beautiful terracotta head, and that belonged to the Dadanites. So you had the Dadanites and the Lihanites as well, who were also traders who lived in Hegra, and so it's sort of slightly earlier than the Nabatean. So we're going back like 2,500 years. I mean, this place is talked about, as you said, 2,700 years ago. Really interestingly, when Ashurbanipal, so one of the Assyrian kings, talks about it as a place that's of parched and dry earth, and he kind of can't understand how people are managing to live there. But it's because they're such kind of masters with water engineering. But the Dadanites are really interesting. There's a place called Daraj, which means mother of the stairs, which again is a massive, massive, massive rock. And if you're flush, there are helicopter rides where you can go and have a look down there, and the whole rock itself we think was sacred. And again, for an archaeologist, it just doesn't get more exciting that if you make your way up to the top, there are thousands of these figurines, human figurines, and the heads have been broken off them, so they're being taken up there as some kinds of offering. So again, and that face, they're the most beautiful, serene faces of these Dadanites. So so it's a really populous, actually, kind of part of the world in ancient history.
Yeah, incredible to think when you're surrounded by desert.
Yeah, but people, we're an amazing species. I always think that, we're so down on ourselves, and we're really stupid sometimes, and we do really ridiculous things. But generally, we're resilient and innovative, and we make things work, and you absolutely sense that there. I mean, there's even silk surviving from these beautiful silk clothes that some of these traders would have worn. And again, it's a bit like Egypt, which preserves things so wonderfully. So you can still see the colours on the actual silk itself. So no, it was I'm really, really glad it's getting its kind of moment in the sun, as it were. And the Romans, there's again in that little clip, one of the reasons I was so excited, I just wasn't expecting to see it. So there's a Roman storeroom, and written on the top of one of the vessels used probably to store water is Legion Cyrenaicum. This was this whole Roman legion that ended up stationed in Hegra, and they've written their name on the side, and you can still see this Latin inscription, around it. So it's very, it's a real sort of, as I said, it's a real hub for all these different cultures.
Oh, totally. And you've mentioned inscriptions several times. I've said about the rock art, because the rock art, I love rock art, and to see so much of it there. Yeah,
the rock art's incredible. I think, that we currently think there's around 300,000 individual works of rock art, and they are Absolutely beautiful, and they show ostriches, as you said, all different kinds of antelope that are being hunted, huge bulls, and it looks like the bulls are either being hunted in nets or they're being kind of honoured, but right the way up high on these rock faces. So I mean, really, it's one of those things, you know, like when you look at ants on the ground, you think, oh, there's a couple of ants, and oh no, there's like thousands of ants there. It's like that with the rock art, and also inscriptions, writing as well, and the Nabatean script and language is the basis of Arabic. So again, they're so present in our lives, even if we don't realise.
That's incredible. I didn't realise that until I saw your series.
Yeah, it is astonishing, isn't it? Yeah. And then you look at it and you begin to sort of see that sort of lovely kind of loopy cursive script that we all recognise, but that's there, put down for the first time on the rock.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many archaeologists working out there. Do you think there's going to be many more discoveries?
Oh, definitely. I mean, 100% definitely. So, and it's one of those things, I said, it's brilliant, because usually archaeologists get into places too early and really mess it up. So, you know, I'll just sort of tell you, when I was last in Fez, it absolutely broke my heart. So I'd just written a book about Socrates, and I was trying to look at the oldest surviving examples of Plato's work writing about Socrates. And one of the oldest surviving is in Oxford, and the second oldest surviving is in a library in Fez, in the Kerouene Mosque, so the sort of archive of the Kerouene Mosque. And I went up there, kind of, it's so exciting to see this, you know, it's 1,500-year-old document. So I said, you know, the second oldest, showing Socrates' work. And because I have nothing against the French at all, but because French archaeologists had got in there in the 1960s, they'd done what they thought was like a really modern thing, and they'd laminated these, I know, good reaction, and I'm not joking, so these beautiful, beautiful bits of parchments and paper were the colour of these walls, because that plastic, 60s plastic, had just disintegrated and degenerated. So, but that's not happening in AlUla, it's the opposite. So actually archaeologists are going in with these like amazing, you know, new bits of tech, basically. So a lot of the work that's being done is very, very non-invasive. So with the tombs, with the human remains, with the tomb objects that are being left. So a lot of it is just being scanned and then analysed without being invaded at all. Yeah.
You talk about so much passion about the Nabateans. Are you going to write a book about them?
Yeah.
She should, shouldn't she?
Yeah, it would be good. No, I'd love to. I've got to write a book about Athens first, so I've got to get that. It takes me about 7 years to write a book. Unfortunately, I'm not one of those sort of like, you know, dashing off. But no, I would absolutely love to. I just think, as I said, and there's something about them. They have this beautiful phrase that there's one point where the Romans are basically trying to kind of enslave them as desert guides. And has anybody seen or read the book or seen the film Dune? Those Dune. Yeah. So they're basically, they are the kind of real Dune. And the Nabateans say, for this incredible speech, when they say, look, why don't you just live as we want to live? What we love is liberty. Liberty is something that we value above everything else. We actually value it above cities. We value it above rich clothes. And you do get that sense that they are a people that just really adore. They, you know, I said they're not unmaterialist, but they really love that sense themselves of being out in the desert under that night sky. So,
like you say, perfectly in tune with their environment.
Totally, really, exactly. I mean, really, you know, we've got a lot of lessons to learn from them. And one of the things that's happening in Hegra at the moment, and also in Petra, is this very cool bit of tech science where they're using, it's called photoluminescence, where you're literally measuring ancient sunlight, the last time that ancient sun hit particular bits of stone. Wow. And we can work out how long it took them to make these water channels, the exact year, the exact month when they were constructed. And again, we're getting a real sense of just how sophisticated that engineering is.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah.
So I think I'm right in saying that when you went out to do the series, that was your first visit to AlUla.
Yeah.
how much did you actually know about it before you went, and what sort of sense of it did you have?
Yeah, well, we did lots of sort of how you make these shows. Again, we always say, we're our own worst enemy, because we sort of film them so it looks very relaxed. We look like I've just woken up in one morning and stretched and kind of thought, oh, I fancy going and talking about the Nabateans now. Of course, it takes years and years and years to set up and research, and we have these very kind of intimate conversations with archaeologists and scientists and researchers to work out how we do it. So I'd been, before we started filming, so I'd been a number of times there. I mean, I was just so excited, because I'd read about this place, and I'd heard about the Romans going to this far south to Hegra. There's a Roman emperor called Philip the Arab, who was almost certainly of Nabatean heritage, and again he has these games where he honours that great sun god Dushara and the Roman victory at the Battle of Actium. So they sort of crop up. It's almost like this sort of jigsaw puzzle. They leave these little clues for us. So to go there, was just astonishing. And I be honest, I thought I hope I'm going to be okay with the role of women in not just in ancient times, but in the contemporary world. And without exception, this wasn't something that was constructed. I was talking to female archaeologists. I was being driven around by female guides.
Yeah.
I ended up going right out into the desert to find some rock art that had never been documented before with a Bedouin elder. And I was driving, and I have to say, I could tell at first he was a bit like, what is going on, and we had this incredible 2 days together, and he learned that the sky didn't fall in as a result of me driving. So it was really interesting. So I felt very relaxed and very safe there. And there was one moment where, when we do these long shots, the crew a mile, they're about 500 yards away. So people quite often think I'm lost, just kind of wandering by myself. And sometimes that can be scary, because people think you're a kind of lone woman. But again, this group of young Saudi boys drove up and just did the, are you okay? Yeah. Welcome to Hegra, welcome to AlUla, can we host you? My mother's at home, and then they rang the mother to show that it was the mother, and but that was an amazing experience, and you felt they were just very proud to be able to show me their home.
Yeah, no, very much so. Because I think, obviously, a lot of us know that, obviously Saudi's changed a lot in the last few years. It had been closed for quite a while, and women were stopped for driving for quite a while. Yeah. But that's all changed since. Probably the most frequent question I do get asked by other women is, what do you wear when you go there? But as we can see, you're very much dressed as you are.
I am, yeah, totally, yeah, totally. So, I wouldn't say my cleavage was on show, but yeah, no, absolutely, just skirts and boots and the scarves that you use to keep the sun away, and that was it. I wasn't asked to cover my head.
Certainly, with local women as well, headscarves aren't required. It's very, very different. Yeah. But basically, shoulders covered.
Yes.
And ideally knees.
Yeah. Well, otherwise you will get burnt. So apart from anything else, it just makes sense
you get
practically.
Burnt, but no, it's a completely different place. As I said, I think at least 50% of the guides are women. They're giving them all training. It's incredible what is happening there, and in Saudi itself, and in this huge area, AlUla.
Yeah, definitely.
So you're going to go back?
Yes! Oh, try and stop me. I keep on getting these little calls from the archaeologists saying, guess what we found now? And no, absolutely. I want to get further out into those hills. And as you said, take a car and just kind of go. I did actually I was driven from Hegra across the border to Petra. And I would really recommend that drive as well, because there's a beautiful oasis town, which is mentioned in the Bible, where there's a well that's still working that was mentioned in the Bible as well, and you can go through that, and so you can the kind of wider Hegra region is amazing to explore as well. And I got given at one point when I was filming, I got given a goat, actually given a baby goat by the lovely Bedouin I was with, and I was like, it's so lovely, but I'm getting on a plane, in a couple of days, so I just can't have it. And they were like, we've given you the, you know.
Oh, no.
And I
What did you
couldn't.
do?
Well, so what do you do? I mean, we've got amazing photos of me then sitting in the car with this sort of lovely, you know, lovely goat. And we were driving again for about 4 or 5 hours in the desert, and our local fixer had relatives who were there, and I'm not making this up, vegetarian. So I said, I'm not giving this goat to somebody if it's going to, you know, kind of end up in the stew. And that was right away out in the middle of the desert, and this goat was then taken into their small holding. But again, isn't it incredible that you can do that? Because there's a real, I don't know if you found this, if you haven't been to Saudi before, there's a massive picnicking culture. So Saudi families take picnics, go and stay the night out in the desert. There's this real sort of, you know, sense that that's something that's beautiful to do.
Yeah.
So that's something I would recommend people to do as well.
Yeah.
And you'll be totally safe doing it, because it's part of life, isn't it?
It is much part of life, and it is an incredibly safe destination.
Yeah.
It keeps appearing on lists now as one of the safest destinations in the world for solo women, for instance,
yeah.
believe it or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, you with your goat, that's amazing. I didn't know that. I then came back with a dog and a cat. I thought I was bad. There's an animal sort of welfare centre, incredible state-of-the-art, and they're doing this amazing programme because there are feral dogs, and of course now they're reintroducing all this wildlife. What they're doing is they're sterilising the dogs, so they catch them, and any feral cats as well. And if they are used to being on the streets, they let them back out once they've been sterilised, because they're not going to adapt anyway to living in a home. And they're all very well fed, I should say. They're all very healthy, in good condition. But any that are clearly domesticated, or, you know, and obviously like here you get the odd situation where somebody may have given up their animal. They have those and they're up for adoption. And I was walking around, I was sending photos back home of, can I bring this one home? Can I bring this one home?
Yeah.
I don't know what he'd have said if I'd sent a photo of a goat.
A goat, no, I know, less transportable.
But no, so wonderful. And I know I'm absolutely keen to go again, because while I won't be looking for the archaeological treasures to the degree you will, I think it's such an exciting time. There are going to be more and more new discoveries, and it's such a huge area as well to explore. Wonderful, by the way, for those of you who are into walking, there's lots of hikes, loads and loads of hikes. If you're into geology, you are going to be absolutely blown away. And there is a geologist working out there who does sometimes do tours, and which was absolutely fantastic. Cycling, obviously it's great for that. So hot air ballooning is something. And I think we'll see more and more activities obviously come along. There's lots that's going to be happening there.
Yeah, and I know this is a bit sort of previous, there's an area to the south where there's an amazing white and black volcano, and there's incredible finds there again, going right the way back to the Stone Age. Right. So that's all going to sort of, it's that in a couple of years, that's what I want to go back and see. See that come along.
I'm sure we'll be seeing more and more museums and interpretation centres, which will be incredible. Yeah. Okay, how are we doing for time? Yeah, I think we've got 5 minutes or so. So has anybody got any questions for Bettany? Right.
Oh, hello. Hi.
I was just wondering, how long is it thought that Hegra was occupied?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Yeah, so very good question. So it was probably occupied for around 1,000 years. So there's, evidence, we think, going back to the 7th century, and it's definitely still being occupied in the late Roman, early Byzantine period. But what happens is that actually sea trade starts to take over. So trade along the Red Sea becomes something that is more used, because it's a very, it's a very punishing route, that. So this basically it becomes more coastal. But if you go to the north, you can still see these beautiful, beautiful Byzantine period villas where people are staying and still very, very rich. And I think it's one of those things, if you look again at the textbooks, and I think it's even what it says in Wikipedia, it's like Petra, they sort of say, you know, it's this flourishing, and then the Romans come and they're there for a bit, and then it is all destroyed, and that is total nonsense. As ever, what the Nabateans are doing, they're doing what they've always done, they're just kind of blending in to a slightly different historical epoch and carrying on what they do well, which is running these huge, massive camel caravans and the caravanserai. So it's because of the sea trade that it's sort of around about the 5th, 6th century in Hegra itself, but other stations along the trading routes are still flourishing today, so there's been continuous habitation. Yeah.
Thanks for your inspiring programme. Fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Can you give us some idea of the dating for the rock art?
Yes.
And what changes have happened in the overall environment during that period? And where did the Nabateans come from?
Yeah, but fantastic questions. Thank you so much. So some of the rock art is very old. So some of it goes back 5,000 years, and some goes back to around 5,000 BCE. And what's really fascinating is if you look at that very early rock art, it's clear it was a much greener space. So in fact, the whole of the Arabian Peninsula, there are rivers which are currently submerged. And if you look at it, it was a very green land, and we know that from the number of cows that you see. So it's huge. There are sheep and cows and goats, and we're talking 5,000 years ago. And then slowly there's this desertification, which means it becomes, a desert, basically a desert culture. So the rock art is really worth seeking that out. I mean, I've never seen rock art like that anywhere in the world. It's absolutely remarkable. And as I said, it's this kind of millennia long storybook of human history, basically. And there was a third. What was your last question? Did you ask about what?
Where did Nabatean come?
Oh, come from. So they are the Arabian. So they're the native inhabitants of the Arabian Peninsula. Yeah.
Yeah, but they came from somewhere before that.
Yeah, well, we're now talking, sort of 100,000 years before. So they're part of that swathe of pastoralists and early farmers who come in. So I mean, absolutely, they're just part of that movement that then ends up across Anatolia as well. But we think there's really interesting current excavation which looks like there might be evidence of habitation there going back as far as 70,000 years. So that's part of this new archaeology that's being discovered now. So so thank you. I'm glad you like the programs. And we're going to come back and do more as more of it opens up. We'll get there and film
absolutely.
it. Yeah.
You touched a little bit on the DNA and the genetic piece.
Yeah.
Has there much research been done to kind of support that hypothesis of the camel traders moving through the coast with the DNA following along the coast? Has that been explored?
Well, it's really, it's happening right now. So there's a big collaboration between Naples and Hegra. So there's a lot of shared scientists, shared research, and they're actually studying the population of Naples to see whether they can tell their phenotypes which match up to the Arabians. And so we know that must have happened, just because if you've got a permanent colony there, they're definitely going to be marrying and having children with Italians. But I think Claire's nodding, I think it's going to be published in about 18 months' time. So we will know that, we will have to write about it once we know, because it is an amazing
I'll keep you to that,
thought.
Bettany.
And they're even, the Nabateans, I don't know if any of you've been I'm sure you have, to the Greek island of Kos, for instance, or Delos, which is very close to Mykonos. So there are Nabatean headstones there of Nabateans who lived there and have died. And again, them worshipping their kind of Nabatean version of Aphrodite, which you can still, with this beautiful Nabatean writing. But again, people just haven't talked about that before, but we know that they were in the Greek islands as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, another question?
It looks quite hot.
Hot.
Looks hot.
It was hot. We were there. We tried to do the bulk of our filming between November and February. It was beautiful. cold at night in the desert, you know, pack your thermals for the desert. Don't forget it gets really, really cold there. But not as hot as where I've just been filming, which is also beautiful, but I was in Uzbekistan in July, where it was 50 degrees. That was hot. That was basically like making a movie in an oven. But yes, but it's nose. If you can go, that is the most beautiful time to travel, November to February.
But I went in May.
Oh yeah.
And just because that's when I had an opportunity really in my diary. And it actually worked really well. It was hot days, but it was still, we were still only talking perhaps late 30s, mid-late 30s. It was bearable. And of course, what you do is you adapt to that. So you spend the middle of the day, you know, in your hotel or in the shade somewhere. And we just made sure that all the activities were early in the morning, late at night. And of course, you said about it being cold in the desert at night. In May, it wasn't. So, you know, you could eat out under the stars and everything, and it was wonderful. And of course, prices were lower. It was completely off season. So not many tourists around at all. So, yeah, it was just a case of adapting. Yeah,
definitely is.
Is there any sort of tourist infrastructure in terms of tours? And how did you, I'm guessing you were invited out there?
I was invited out there. We've actually got a representative of AlUla here, the UK representative, Claire, at the back. And yeah, Claire. Yeah, and do feel free to launch yourself on Claire afterwards. So I'm sure she can, and it was, I must say, I went with Claire, so yeah.
Fantastic time. So honestly, it's an amazing destination. Yes, I think in answer to your question, I'm sorry I missed all of the question, but you can book a number of different tours. There are a lot of tour operators in the UK that will do both your own tours specifically for yourselves, or some route tours that are already preset. When you actually do Hegra, there are several ways you can do it. You can do it by a small coach tour, which takes about 3 hours. You can do the best way is to go in a Jeep, in a Land Rover tour, combine it with the wildlife tour, for example. So there are a number of tours. And the thing I would really recommend is if you go to experiencealula.com, if you picked up the little mini brochure, experiencealula.com has got all the touring options. So everything that Lyn's talked about, from stargazing to doing Hegra to doing Bettany, you can find all of those tours online, and they're all bookable.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. So Claire will still be here hanging around for a bit, so do feel free to go and ask her any questions. Also, excitingly, for those of you who would love to visit Petra again and get that all in context, there are now direct flights between Jordan and AlUla. So that would be a brilliant combination, and I do hope some tour operators will be picking that up. As something to do, because that would really give you that feeling, wouldn't it, of
totally
this old route.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. And you can also, the other thing I would recommend, I mean, is if you can do it, if you want to fly to Aqaba in southern Jordan and then again do the drive down, and then you're kind of retracing that route of the traders. And it's honestly, the landscape is so beautiful. I mean, we just couldn't. So my cameraman sort of was in a pool, or you know, a pool of excitement on the bottom of the floor. You just couldn't put the camera down. I mean, it's really beautiful.
There's not enough superlatives really.
No.
And for those of you, I mean, the landscape is actually more varied than perhaps one realises.
Yeah.
But for those of you who, for instance, love the Four Corners area of the United States, you know, Utah, places like that, or the Namibian desert. Or indeed parts of Jordan, you know, with Wadi Rum and so on. You're going to see a lot of the same sort of scenery here. And the oasis, I mean, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
In the oasis, for instance, this is really being regenerated. There's always been farms there. But what's wonderful now is that while it was perhaps dying out, some of these farms, because you know, the kids didn't want to take over, they were going to the cities. Now, because there's agritourism, there's people wanting to go visit the farms. You can go and eat, you know, on a farm, have a meal there, or you can have a tour of a farm. There's a farmer's market now you can visit. and people are selling their goods there. So again, it's really wonderful to see this revitalisation where it's the young people and the women who are really in the fore there, and it's giving them, something really tangible, employment. And the dates are wonderful. Yeah. You're into dates. The dates there are wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic. And mangoes, and again, that goes back, they used to grow mangoes there, and cotton, and beautiful, figs. So it's richer than you'd expect, agriculturally.
Yeah, and a lot more to do there than you would think.
Yeah.
Do we have one final question? We'll come to you as well.
Yes.
Because it's so little there, it's just a remembering, but there's nothing online about this.
Yeah, no, that's right. So the question's about these tombs in Al-Bad, sort of in northern Saudi, pretty much just before you get to Jordan, a place called Al-Bad. And again, astonishing. And that's actually where I was talking about this amazing Byzantine villa that they're finding there, which is being excavated by a French and Saudi team. So yeah, I mean, you could really, really geek out if you like history, and you will often be the first people that are seeing a lot of the material, which is just astonishing. So but Al-Bad, hard to, I think that is actually being taken over, and I think it's going to come under sort of new management, so that it's going to be easier to go around those tombs as well.
Yeah, so there's going to be so much happening over the last few years, next few years. Yeah.
I was just really more interested back on the Nabateans these
days.
So I found it fascinating, you were saying, obviously how strong the female involvement was in the culture, and I kind of wondered about that as to whether you said that you think that they tended to stay whilst the traders, the males went out. Do you think there was ever evidence of women actually going with the traders and exploring different parts of the world?
Yeah, I mean, that is the most brilliant question. So we think there is, because some of these female traders are coming back and talking about the goods that they've acquired. So we think that there are some of these, probably the kind of higher level ranking female merchants who are going. But more often than not, we hear, for instance, there's an attack on Petra, and we hear that the women and the children, the silver, have all been left on a rock. So I think generally they stayed in the cities, but we know from at least one source that some of the kind of higher status traders would travel. And again, it makes sense, if you think of those guys who are away for months at a time, and we just found actually in Uzbekistan, funnily enough, I don't know if you saw that program that went out a couple of weeks ago, beautiful little figure of a camel, and they realised that there's a rider on it and these lovely pictures from the water, and then there's a cat and a dog on the back of the camel, because it's just showing you would just travel with your pets, these were kind of moving cities. So it would be pretty extraordinary if women didn't go, but I do think generally they were at home, and therefore running things. It's like the Spartans in the ancient world. The kind of guys are all off fighting, so the women are in charge back at home.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. Okay, I think we're going to have to wind it up there. I know one or two people have got trains to catch and so on. But you're obviously also very welcome to stay around for a while, talk to Bettany while she's still here. We've still got some food and drink over there. And Claire, as we said, is at the back. If you've got any specific questions about AlUla, I'm sure she'll be able to answer them for you. I'm sure most of you have seen that series that we keep mentioning, Lost World to the Nabateans. It is still on catch-up on Channel 4. If you look at channel4.com, for instance, or look on your television, you'll find that well worth watching. We've got a magazine here, which I don't know if all of you have seen it from a few years ago. We believe we were the first magazine in the world to put Hegra on the cover, of travel magazine. And so that's a lovely article from George Kapouras, our editor-in-chief, who's at the back. We've got the latest issue as well, which you've probably all got, but do have a look. We've got the wonderful little brochure, which, as Claire mentioned, and has got lots more details on AlUla in there. And then, as I say, in January, my own article is coming out, which will be going a bit more about the nature and wildlife side and the whole regeneration that's happening in AlUla. So, lots and lots, hope that's really inspired you. But most of all, Bettany, you are just a joy to talk to. It's been brilliant.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Lovely to be here. I should also just say, we kind of really like each other. We're not related, despite the fact we got the same. I remember the first time we spoke, we were both like, oh, a bit of a Welsh heritage and Hughes. So no, it's lovely as ever.
And we did actually message each other today because we tend to like the same colour clothes. And so we did check what each other were wearing.
Yeah, that's right. Oh no, but lovely to be on the stage.
Anyway, thanks very much, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.